This is the Polestar 2, a hatchback sedan with heritage from Volvo, and it's designed to challenge the likes of the Tesla Model 3. And it's actually kind of competitive. Let me explain. They offer this car in 3 different versions: the single motor, dual motor, and dual motor performance pack, which is what I drove here. And in 2024, Polestar looked at Tesla in the eyes and said, we can go band for band. The dual motor and dual motor performance are almost identical in price to Tesla's corresponding Model 3 long range and performance. There are some asterisks depending on your situation. We'll get into pricing later because it's kind of complicated. And to be upfront with you, I don't see much reason to get the single motor Polestar 2 unless you absolutely prioritize max range. In 2024, they made the single and dual motor the same price, and the dual motor option not only gives you all-wheel drive, but also autopilot features and fog headlights that don't come with the single motor. So I wouldn't really recommend it. And it's worth mentioning, Polestar has some really exciting SUVs available for pre-order right now that may be worth waiting for instead of getting the Polestar 2, depending on your preference. The Polestar 3 is an SUV, the largest car in the lineup, and it has more of a luxury focus, plus this new styling in the front. It starts at $73K, and they just started rolling out the first deliveries in June 2024. But I'm more excited for this Polestar 4. It's a crossover with more of a performance focus, and it starts at $55K. It's definitely more expensive than a Model Y, but it did have a really nice interior, and it's got this unique back glass. It's actually frosted out, so it just uses the rear camera to see behind you. I'm curious to see how Tesla responds with their refreshed Model Y that hopefully will be announced soon, but who knows, it's definitely long overdue. We'll see if they could bring the build quality and luxury up to par with the Polestar 4. They definitely did that with the Model 3 refresh. We'll get into that later. But for now, the Model Y is dirt cheap. The performance Model Y starts at $51,500. And I had to show you these Polestar ones because these are pretty sweet. It's their first car they ever made, and these are hybrid coupes that put out 619 horsepower and has carbon fiber everywhere. But they cost $150K, and they only made 1,500 of them in a limited run, including this hand-painted one. Now back to the Polestar 2. I will say the Tesla Model 3 does win in range and acceleration, but one area the Polestar wins in is its trunk. It has a hatchback style opening that makes it a lot easier to load and unload large items, and it also has a kick sensor, which I prefer over Tesla's solution, where they just use your phone, and if you're standing in proximity and the camera sees you standing behind it, it'll wait a few seconds, beep at you, and then open up. The kick sensor is much more explicit and opens and closes when I want it to, whereas the Tesla will sometimes open inadvertently when I'm just standing next to the car. And the Polestar 2 just does have a few more of those nice little things around the trunk, like a storage net on the side and hooks everywhere. And it's got this divider thing in the middle, which I guess can help prevent groceries from sliding around, and you can hang groceries from those hooks as well. And it does have a sub-trunk like the Tesla, although it's not nearly as deep or as wide as the Teslas. But the hatchback opening is a small thing that definitely makes life a lot easier. This performance version has a 78 kilowatt hour battery that gives it 247 miles of EPA estimated range, and it's pushing 455 horsepower and 546 pound-feet of torque that gets it accelerating from 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds. And while this is really quick and will beat most cars on the road, after giving it a test drive, it felt pretty slow compared to my Tesla Model 3 performance. The acceleration on the Polestar 2 definitely left something to be desired. But I will say the ride quality during everyday driving felt much nicer in this Polestar 2. It seems a little more geared towards luxury and comfort rather than, pure track performance. The Tesla Model 3 performance feels very stiff, both the suspension and the car body itself. And to be honest, you don't really need a stiff car unless you're really going to the track. The Polestar 2 felt much better over speed bumps. When I go over a speed bump in the Model 3 performance, it feels quite jarring and the whole car kind of shakes a little bit and almost feels like the car bottom is hitting the road. Whereas when I go over a speed bump in the Polestar 2, it just smoothly glides over it, and then once it's over that speed bump, it doesn't oscillate back and forth. It just kind of settles really nicely. And apparently you can adjust the suspension on the Polestar 2 to make it more stiff. But personally, I think if you want an affordable EV track car, you're much better off getting the Tesla Model 3 Performance and upgrading its brakes. It's got better acceleration and range. I think the Polestar 2's strengths lie in that it is a sportier car that really excels in everyday driving with its hatchback trunk and more comfortable suspension, and also some nice interior features. Now moving on to the interior. I'd say both the Rivian and Polestar have a similar interior kind of feeling, that sustainable minimalism going on, but it's not as extreme as Tesla's sci-fi minimalism. And a lot of people ask me if the Tesla Model 3 has extendable seat bases, which it does not, but this Polestar does have. And if you get the performance pack, it does come with these yellow seat belts, which I think looks pretty sweet. It has 3 steering weight options you can choose, and even the firm felt light to me. If the Tesla Model 3 Performance feels kind of like a BMW on the heavier side, I'd say this car feels more like a Lexus. It's really easy to turn and it's very smooth. Additionally, you can make this car creep like a gas car when you're lifted off the pedal, but I prefer turning that off. This car does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but you do have to plug your phone into the car to do that. Instead, I think they're encouraging you to use the built-in native car functionality, which actually is more intuitive and easier to use than I thought it would be. One big advantage this car has over the Tesla is its heads-up display screen. It's really good and integrates with the Maps feature, so you can navigate much easier. I'm a big fan of this one. Overall, the materials of this car mostly felt very good, but there's a few small things, like this volume knob. I like how it's a physical control, but it felt plasticky and even felt cheaper than my 2017 Mazda 3. And they have this piano black plastic, which I'm not crazy about. It shows a lot of fingerprints and scratches. And I like how they stuck with a physical shifter that isn't just a little knob like on other newer cars, but it actually feels quite substantial in the hand and feels good to shift. In the past, you could say the Polestar 2 had a huge advantage in build quality over the Tesla Model 3. But that has changed with the 2024 refresh of the Model 3. Tesla has really gotten that car basically on the same level of build quality and materials as the Polestar 2. And I think at this point, it's really just a matter of preference. When I bang on the sides of the Tesla Model 3, it doesn't shake or rattle or squeak anymore. It just sounds very solid. And the Alcantara on the Model 3 actually feels a little nicer than the cloth they use on the Polestar. Again, I think they are very similar in interior quality, and I think it's just up to you on what you prefer the most. There's not much space in the back, probably to make space for the trunk. But one subtle thing that is good about this car is that your feet actually sit lower. So your knees and feet aren't raised up because the floor is higher in other EVs, such as the Tesla Model 3. And this car does have a killer panoramic roof that's all one piece, unlike the Tesla Model 3. And it comes included in the performance version. If you get the single or dual motor normal versions, and you want this, you'd have to buy the Plus pack, an extra $2,200 upgrade. That gives you the roof, better sound system, better seat material, and a few other things. Some final thoughts. I think if you prefer a more comfortable ride, want a more versatile hatchback trunk, and you prefer the more traditional gas car control surfaces like the shifter or full-on door handles or the actual turn signal stalks, then you might like the Polestar 2. On the other hand, the Tesla Model 3 will give you around 50 miles more range, faster acceleration times, and of course Tesla-specific things like full self-driving. And Tesla's supercharging network is a big advantage over other EV car companies, but they are adding Polestar to the network sometime this year, apparently. And like I covered before, the Polestar 2 used to have a huge advantage in build quality over the Tesla Model 3, but with the 2024 refresh, I would say these two cars are very much on par with each other. So it really comes down to personal preference at this point. And finally, that leaves price. If you do not qualify for the EV tax credit, then these two cars are virtually identical in price. The Polestar 2 dual motor and dual motor performance are basically $500 to $1,000 more than the corresponding Tesla models. But if you do qualify for the EV tax credit of $7,500, then things change. The Tesla cars do qualify for that tax credit, but the Polestar 2 does not. So if you go with the Polestar and you do qualify for the EV tax credit, you have to ask yourself, is this worth $7,500 more than the corresponding Tesla car? Huge shout out to Oye and Anthony from Polestar Los Angeles for letting me drive their cars. If you like the 2 or any of their upcoming cars, hit them up and they'll help you out. I'll see you for the next video.